Thanks for watching live or listening back to this show from Teachers Talk Radio. You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good morning. It's Sunday. How are you doing? The 12th of July, 2026. A crucial moment in World Cup history. We'll talk about that. I'm sure that's going to be on the front pages. Well, let's see which ones have published that. And everything in between. We're also talking de-stressing. Because after all, this is a radio station for teachers.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
And of course, as we head into the summer break, it is very important to de-stress. How are you feeling today? Did you watch the match? We'll talk about that when we get to the news. Those of you that don't watch football, I am, of course, referring to the World Cup victory yesterday, quarterfinals against Norway, a very tense game. And I wake up feeling very fresh, as I hope you do. The summer breeze blowing outside. It is, a lot could be worse. Pressure to perform is what we're talking about in today's show, because that is part of what teaching is. And of course, that's one of the top sources of stress. It can at times be anything but relaxing, can't it? Let's just own that fact. So I thought we'd talk today about finding ways of coming to terms with that pressure and possibly improving our ability to cope. So we're going to talk about that. If you do want to get in touch, you can post a comment in the chat function. That's all you've got to do, and I'll read it. You can no longer call in, unfortunately, but we didn't have many callers anyway. Actually, I think I had one in the year that I've been doing the show. So in reality, actually, nothing's missed there, but we do get lots of fantastic comments. So do feel free to do that. Just type it in the box and I will pick it up. You are, of course, listening to TT Radio. It's the Sunday Breakfast Show with Finn, and we are talking stress. So let's acknowledge that a challenging job can be both interesting and exciting. And that's why I'm a teacher, right? But some situations are challenging and unhealthy. So that's also a given, isn't it? And I guess it's about acknowledging that. The most common workplace stressors for teachers are going to be different to other professions. And I'm not saying that teaching is on the most stressful thing you'll ever encounter, but it's certainly on the high end at times. And that can be what makes it fun, what makes it exciting. But equally, it can be really difficult. You can have demands made on you that take you beyond the capacity to cope. You have sometimes very little control over what's in front of you, and yet you're held accountable for student outcomes and for department outcomes in a way that possibly other jobs you wouldn't. Well, we talked about football. I suppose that's the only other major job I can think of where something that really isn't in your control becomes your responsibility. I'm talking the England manager. If, for example, England didn't get beyond the group games, they would have sacked him. They would have sacked him. And isn't it similar with teaching at times? Okay, we're not going to get sacked for a set of poor results, but we're certainly going to be questioned, called into question. And that's most schools. So yes, you're going to get more severe conversations going on in a particular school culture where that is what drives the teachers. for whatever reason, and other schools less so, but it's always going to be there. It's always going to be there in the background. And I suppose the surprising thing is just how accountable teachers are made for particular results. We've talked about that on previous shows. Unclear expectations, I wrote down, creating no-win situations. You can also have bullying in the workplace. You can also have high conflict in the workplace, and that's so stressful when that goes on. It's draining. Isn't it draining? I'm not only talking about conflict with students, because that can happen, but I guess as teachers, we're trained to deal with that. I'm talking conflict with staff, and that can be really draining. Low recognition for your efforts. It can sometimes be a low recognition job. Well, I do this radio show on a Sunday, so I get the recognition, mainly from about 3 or 4 people, but it's there. But yeah, low recognition for your efforts, few opportunities to be recognized. And of course, poor management. That can also take place. Poor leadership, that can be a factor. So all of those things mean that the workplace that is teaching in a school can be tremendously stressful, and you are under pressure to perform. So in short, we don't thrive doing work that feels unrewarding, do we? We do it for a reason. But over time, with all those other stresses going on, unless we take the time to de-stress, that sort of thing can actually wear us down. So the big question, of course, we've got an answer already. Can a stressful job like teaching negatively impact your health? Well, yes, it can. And if you think, I disagree with that, type in the comments. Type in the comments. I want to hear. Sustain high levels of stress. That is almost a fact of life, isn't it? That can lead to poor health outcomes. And if you don't believe me, 1997 Australian study, here we go. Workplace stress doesn't necessarily raise our blood pressure, but it's the level of cortisol that takes place. So the researchers in this study found that workers in stressful jobs, and not just in teaching, might be prone to high blood pressure, but only if they use maladaptive coping strategies. So essentially, the stress that we encounter, there are ways we can deal with it. So the workers they found who relaxed, used relaxation techniques, problem focused coping techniques such as reorganizing their work time, or made good use of social support, remain physically well. So the problem actually isn't workplace stress, but actually unhealthy coping mechanisms. What do you do with that blood pressure? As Alan Shearer would say, pressure's for tires. But also, what do you do with the cortisol? So those are the things that can be raised when you're faced with a stressful environment, because all stress is the difference between your expectation and reality. That's what it boils down to, your expectation of something and reality. And that's why teaching can be really stressful, because you probably, as a teacher, have high expectations. We've looked at the correlation between perfectionism and teaching. So you've got high expectations. And when the externals, your pupils, your colleagues, the school environment do not meet those expectations, then that's where the stress is felt. So we'll talk coping tactics. We're going to talk coping tactics because, of course, there are going to be places where work can seem impossible, but you stay nonetheless. So what do you do? Well, I found, should we do the top 10? We need a sort of jingle for this. I think I might have a jingle somewhere for a top 10. That'll do. 1, begin every day by taking 10 minutes to plan and prioritize a realistic set of targets. Now, you probably already do that if you get in the morning. I find I can be most efficient when I'm in just before 8 o'clock. And I get actually a good chunk of work done in the sort of 20 minutes before the students are even on site. Do you do that? Does that work for you? I used to stay really late. I don't do that anymore. I sort of stay on school site 8 till 4. 8 till 4 is my go-to these days. So begin every day by taking just 10 minutes to plan and prioritize a realistic set of targets. Keep here's a good one. Yeah, I did write this down and then I didn't really process it until I'm talking with you now about it. Keeping track of your stress throughout the day. So I actually, in my workplace, I rate my well-being out of 10. And if someone asks, how are you? I actually give them a rating. I sort of say, I'm a 6, I'm a 4. Yeah, a little bit strange to do that, but it does mean that you keep track of your well-being and stress during the day. Of course, you can probably get one of those Aura rings or other types of rings. Many different types are available, of course. Other rings are available. There's loads of different watches and things that track things, but identifying situations that are particularly stressful, maybe you avoid them or you cultivate healthy coping mechanisms when you're in them. Setting yourself no work times. So I know that, yeah, I'll probably look at email. Although I say I won't, I'll probably look at email a couple of times in the evening, and I'll probably almost definitely look at it, a couple of times early morning when I'm up, and I'll look at it at the weekend. Sure. But having no work times is crucial. I don't take a lot of work home for that very reason. And I've always tried to maintain that barrier. Well, it's a boundary, isn't it? So you just, you know what to do. And another one is using your time off to the full. I launched this show today talking about the summer, right? And the summer breeze, and how we've got to take time to de-stress, and we have to take this summer break. This is one where you really need to just take that time to recharge and recover. Of course, using relaxation techniques, that's key. Exercise, meditation, all of that's useful. Here's one though that's interesting. Identifying colleagues that you can offload to, and maybe they can offload to you. So let's call them allies. So it's an effective part to essentially make space for that time where colleagues, you can share and get mutual support, because your line manager, your boss, isn't always going to be there for you in a particular way, or not particularly effective. I've had a host in my 10 years of teaching. I've had a whole host of management, some decent, some not so decent. And humans are imperfect. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses, and it's about recognizing that. But getting the support is key. Getting the support is key. And I wrote this down, but this is the fallacy of teaching, isn't it? So I wrote this down as number 7. Don't try to control the uncontrollable. Yes, let that sit, because really as teachers, we do that, don't we? We do try and control the uncontrollable. Well, don't try and control the uncontrollable, because actually there's going to be things outside of your control. The current school I'm at actually does have that within its kind of, when conversations get tricky, they do sometimes, certainly they've reminded me, there are lots of variables beyond your control. And it's about working within the setting that you're in, facilitating change when necessary, and leaving at that. You can't fix the impossible. And linked to that, number 8, avoiding perfectionism. Accepting the good enough. Teaching, I've talked about this before as well, teaching can often breed a lot of perfectionism. It's a learnt anxiety you end up with a lot of the time, this sort of high intensity alertness in the classroom, as if things are life or death. And education is important, don't get me wrong. Learning is important, but not at the expense of health. Number 9, I really like this, because I actually think humour and pedagogy, there was a whole show on this on TT Radio. Check that out, the full back catalogue. Humour and pedagogy, it's underrated, the role of the funny teacher. Finding the funny side, laughing at a situation. I had a really annoying situation. I better be careful here, because I certainly don't want to identify anything, because I know colleagues listen and report back. Brilliant. So I'm on tenterhooks, the professional radio presenter. They're always accountable for whatever they say. But where was I? Yeah, I had a really annoying situation on Friday. Really annoying. And I won't say what it was or when it happened or how it happened or where it happened, but it really irritated me. And I think the students saw it, and I think the students felt it as well. But about 3-4 minutes later, I then just turned it into something funny. And it worked. It was a release for everyone. So finding the funny side, got to be worth it. And finally, number 10, appreciating the positive. So try to focus on your Do you do a gratitude journal? I try and do actually what 3 things am I grateful for in a given moment, if I have a moment to pause. So that can be really good, appreciating the positive. So there are the coping tactics that might help with de-stressing in a stressful workplace. We'll talk more after we have heard from our sponsors right here on TT Radio. In fact, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to play the opening jingle once again for today's radio show for the reasons that will hopefully come clear very soon.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TT Radio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Okay, so the reason I played that jingle is because I needed to check I had the right sponsors. I've been told off before, but like Steve Wright, you own it and you essentially make all of this part of the show. This is a live show. So at the end of the day, everything you hear is live right here, right now, and you own your mistakes. And that's what I've just done. Hopefully not too sloppy. Here it is then. These are our sponsors for today's show.
In education, we all want recruitment to be fair and inclusive because the gender pay gap won't disappear without clear, practical steps in how we hire. Recent national research shows schools are already taking meaningful action. 40% of leaders now include pay or progression details in adverts. 35% highlight well-being support, and around 1 in 5 are using anonymised shortlisting to reduce bias. Teaching vacancies, the Department for Education's free official job listing service, makes these steps easier with clear salary fields, flexible working filters, and an application format that supports blind recruitment. It also removes previous salary questions so candidates are assessed on their skills and experience rather than their past pay. For your next hire or your next role, go online and search Teaching Vacancies Gov UK.
This show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit hachetlearning.com to explore the full range of titles.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Welcome back. It's the Sunday Breakfast with Finn. I made a reference to Steve Wright, but then when the sponsors were playing, I thought, well, actually, not everyone's going to know Steve Wright. He died about 2 years ago. A great radio presenter, really inspiring. I met him a couple of times and, yeah, inspired me to do this. And own your mistakes during a live radio show. And actually, owning your mistakes in teaching, there's something really liberating, actually. Do you find this? Here's one for you. When you make them, because that's the thing, there's an argument for teachers to maintain their authority in the classroom and be sort of the fountain of knowledge. You have to. And the moment that's challenged, that can be quite destabilizing. But there is something really liberating saying, I got it wrong. I got it wrong. I forgot that. Or I made a mistake here. Do you find that? The moments I've done that, it's actually helped with connecting with the class because we're human at the end of the day. We're human. The 3 E's, excellent engagement and ethics. Harvard professor of Cognition and Education, Howard Gardner, identified 3 intertwining aspects that make up good work. Work that feels more rewarding than stressful. So I thought for this little bit of the show, we could talk about how there are aspects of teaching which is stressful, but it's about finding that balance and going with what's rewarding and not stressful. So the 3 E's: excellence, you're satisfied that you're working to a high standard; engagement, you enjoy your work; and ethics, you think you're doing the right thing, both in your field of work and by your team. Wow. That's quite a big one, isn't it? It's quite a big one. Anyway, tackling tasks. So here's the thing. How do you tackle tasks in a way that is effective in the teaching workplace? And this might make more sense if we talk more about this when I come back in September. This is the second last show, by the way, before the summer break. But of course, during the game time that we've got as teachers, there are going to be some stressful parts. And the natural tendency is actually at this time of year to procrastinate. Do you find that? Do you find that sometimes you procrastinate because you think, I'll just do it in September? Oh, I'll just plan that scheme of work in September. Procrastination is, a real issue, I think, particularly at this time of year. So I wanted to talk about this because the science, of course, says putting off a task results in heightened stress as you rush to meet a deadline while facing a growing workload. So if you put it off till September, you're going to struggle. The work doesn't get done. So how do you stop procrastinating, right? And face the stress head on? Well, American psychologist Joseph Ferrari, possibly related to the car, possibly not, didn't have time to research that bit, pointed out that it's easy to delay starting work because we're not in the right mood. But by doing that, we're actually making a fundamental mistake. Well, of course we are, because we're succumbing to the false belief that we'll somehow feel more in the mood later. Now, I would actually challenge that and say sometimes you just know when's a good time. I talked earlier on today's show, in fact, about how you know when to be efficient and when perhaps you ride the wave of inefficiency. I'm talking about early mornings, working in the early morning. That's I've recently found really effective rather than saving it to the sort of late afternoon. And of course, we're succumbing to the false belief that we'll somehow feel more in the mood later, says Joseph Ferrari, even though nothing has changed. Or if it has, the only difference is that the job has become more urgent, resulting in more stress. There's a lot of urgency in teaching, and I actually sometimes feed off it because the urgency in teaching does mean you get your tasks done quickly. But what Ferrari suggests is instead of waiting for a task to feel manageable, you're actually better off making a start, even if you don't feel motivated. And this is also backed up by American psychiatrist David Burns. He's also a CBT expert. So he observes once we've started the task, we usually discover some motivation. We've all done it with a scheme of learning. You get into the zone, and once you're in the zone, you got the motivation. So we've definitely lessened the stress of procrastinating there. His quote is, action must come first and the motivation comes later. There's an interesting book. I think it's The Let Them. I read it over the Easter break. I think it's the Mel Robbins, The Let Them theory. I don't always buy into pop psychology, but they talk about a rocket ship. That's easy for you to say. Whereby the countdown, if you don't want to do a task, actually counting down from 5 through to 1, it does something with your brain, which enables you to get into gear and actually go. So, for example, getting up out of bed, you don't want to get up out of bed. There's the simple one, probably a universal one, both for students, staff, and every human being at some time is going to struggle to get out of bed. You do a countdown from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And in that time, the theory is it blocks your brain from thinking about anything else, and it's supposed to establish motivation. Try it. Yes, all very interesting. We'll talk more after the news right here on TT Radio. Let's go to the latest news read by Joe Fox.
In education, we all want recruitment to be fair and inclusive because the gender pay gap won't disappear without clear, practical steps in how we hire. Recent national research shows schools are already taking meaningful action. 40% of leaders now include pay or progression details in adverts. 35% highlight well-being support, and around 1 in 5 are using anonymised shortlisting to reduce bias. Teaching vacancies, the Department for Education's free official job listing service, makes these steps easier, with clear salary fields, flexible working filters, and an application format that supports blind recruitment. It also removes previous salary questions, so candidates are assessed on their skills and experience rather than their past pay. For your next hire or your next role, go online and search Teaching Vacancies Gov UK.
This show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit hachetlearning.com to explore the full range of titles.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The BBC says school suspensions and exclusions in England have dropped for the first time since the pandemic, according to new government figures. There were 913,000 suspensions across state schools in 2024 to 25, a 4% decrease on the previous year. Permanent exclusions were also down 9% at 9,900. Suspension rates dropped in secondary and special schools, but have increased in primary schools. Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson said the pandemic had left a pernicious legacy, but that teachers across the country were helping the next generation turn a corner. Last year, school suspensions reached their highest levels in nearly 20 years, and despite this year's drop, rates are still higher than they were in 2018 to 19. Full details of all the figures can be found on the BBC News website. Sticking with the BBC and the theme of behaviour, BBC News Northern Ireland says the nation has appointed a new school behaviour czar, Tom Bennett. Mr Bennett has been appointed to review the behaviour policies of schools and how useful they are. He said children can lose up to 1 hour per day through low-level disruption, and behaviour was about teaching children really robust habits of doing things even when they're hard. Bennett was appointed by the Conservative government in England in 2015 to look at how schools in England managed pupil behaviour, and then was appointed Attendance and Behaviour Ambassador by the Department for Education under Bridget Phillipson in 2025. According to Northern Ireland's Department of Education, 4,756 pupils were suspended from schools in the country in 2025 to 26, also down on figures from the previous year. Northern Ireland's Commissioner for Children and Young People, Chris Quinn, said, "I'm struggling to understand the rationale behind this appointment," and he went on to question if it was the best use of resources. More details can be found online. FE Week says colleges are still breaking government spending rules on exit payments almost 4 years after colleges were reclassified as public bodies. FE Week has found the Treasury's managing public money rules mean that FE colleges need Department for Education sign-off before making large staff severance payments, including those worth £50,000 or more. But DFE figures released via a Freedom of Information request show that in 2024 to 25, of 28 special payment requests, 6 colleges made retrospective requests once cash had already been paid out. Officials subsequently rejected 4 of those requests, leading to concern that colleges are not always playing by the rules. More details can be found on FE Week. Finally, TES magazine covers the appointment of new CEOs to one of England's biggest multi-academy trusts. ARC will replace Lucy Heller, who's stepping down after 22 years with the organisation, with Patrick Wall, co-founder of the Centre for Education Systems, and Katie Oliver, currently part of the ARC team. Mr Wall will be the Chief Executive of ARC Schools, whilst Miss Oliver will lead ARC's charitable arm. Ms Heller will leave at the end of this academic year, having joined ARC in 2004 as the founding director of ARC Schools. She became the CEO of both the Charitable Foundation and the Multi Academy Trust in 2012. The magazine features a wide-ranging interview with Ms. Heller, and this can be found online. This has been Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
ARC. What's your opinion of ARC? ARC Academies. Harris Academies. Oh, yes. Thanks, Joe. Can't have a radio show without the weather, though, of course. So today it's breezier, thank goodness. Wasn't the heat difficult last week in the classroom? Didn't you find it really difficult? Well, fortunately, it's going to be pretty breezy this morning, but this afternoon, unfortunately, it's going to be another hot day. Tonight, though, is going to be dry with clear skies for the most part. Towards the end of the night, there's going to be some patches of cloud moving in from the east. It's going to turn breezy with fresh northeasterly winds across the country. On Monday, we're going to look at a dry day and feel it. And it's going to be quite a good chance of sunshine. But it will turn less warm and will stay nice and breezy. The outlook for Tuesday to Thursday. Tuesday is expected to start with areas of low cloud around, but these should soon clear to reveal sunny spells. Low cloud will develop again for a time overnight, dispersing on Wednesday morning to leave sunny spells and some patchy cloud later. Thursday looks set to start dry with a good deal of sunshine. That's the last day of term for us. When does your school finish? Because ours finishes on Thursday. There it is. That's your weather. Shall we take a look at the papers, the front pages that you could bring into the classroom the final week of teaching, should you so wish? So what have we got? Many of the papers, in fact, cover new details that have emerged in the investigation into former Tory minister Anne Widdecombe's death. The Sunday Telegraph leads with the arrest overnight of a 28-year-old man who it says was apprehended in South Yorkshire after a manhunt following murder. So that's the Telegraph. The Mail, Norway versus England, expert analysis, and then Reform MPs given 24-hour protection in Widdecombe murder hunt. So this is an interesting one because I think this edition of the newspaper must have gone to print before the police announced the new arrest. And actually, the England win as well, I don't think is going to be on all the papers because the England win was at 1 a.m. Unless the papers didn't print until after that. But certainly the Mail missed the boat, it seems, on the update regarding Anne Widdecombe and the suspect who's been arrested. Because that's right, they arrested someone, didn't they? On Friday, I think it was. They were then released on Saturday, and it was announced they're no longer part of the police investigation. That was a 26-year-old male, and then a 28-year-old male has been arrested more recently. So that is the Mail and the interpretation around that. The Sun on Sunday headlines with the new Widdecombe twist, writing police are on the hunt for Anne Killer. Again, I think that possibly was published before the update. You'll have to check with the editors. Don't shoot the messenger. Sunday Mirror, Saved by the Bell. Jude scores twice to send Lions in to the World Cup semi-finals. So, as I celebrated at the start of the show, the little thing I posted on the socials also had England music to it. Yes, of course, England did win. So I'm sure that's going to be a talking point in whatever school you're in, if you're teaching in a British school or even an international school. When I taught in China, and England were knocked out, and this shows my age, and England were knocked out of the Euros by Iceland, it was the talking point for a week. And China are not a footballing nation. I think you can call China many things, but one of them is not footballing nation. Yet, it was the talking point for a good week. I suppose it was pretty cataclysmic, if that's the right word. Certainly catastrophic that England were knocked out then. But some good news to talk about, at least in the classroom. And you could start with that headline, should you so wish. Saved by the Bell. Jude Bellingham scoring twice, sending the Lions in to the World Cup semi-finals. Brilliant stuff. Sunday People, bell of the ball. That's the Sunday People's headline. Jude shines as England beat Norway 2-1 to reach the semi-finals. Belle of the Ball. That's the Sunday People. Daily Star, Miami nice. So, of course, capturing the celebrations of England's win in Miami, the Daily Star splashes Miami nice using the front familiar. Of course, you could probably just show that picture because most students will know that that is from the franchise, controversial franchise, in fact, Grand Theft Auto Vice City, and a title reminiscent, of course, of the 1980s TV series Miami Vice, but only the older teachers would know that bit. Norway can row your boat home, it adds for good measure. Brilliant stuff. Sunday Times, Jude drags England into Final Four. That's it. Some great players. I think that's what has been missing in the last sort of 20 years of English football. The superstars of English football. Yes, we've had the Beckhams, we've had the Owens, but they've not necessarily been consistent enough in a World Cup. You had Beckham being sent off the game against Argentina. Perhaps that's an awful omen, isn't it, given that we are going to be playing Argentina on Wednesday. Just realised this has turned into football commentary. We should rebrand the station. Football Talk Radio. I believe that's another station. Other radio stations are available. Jude drags England into Final Four. So that's the Sunday Times. So it's other top story, actually. Widdicombe killed minutes after last message to TV colleague. Focusing on, this is the new WhatsApp messages that have been released that appear to show that she had sent a message to researcher at Channel 5, arranging an interview for that afternoon, and then failed to respond to a follow-up message. And then found 24 hours or so later, wasn't she, on the Friday? So the death was announced early morning on a Friday, but then the murder investigation news broke sort of mid-afternoon, didn't it, on Friday? Sunday Express, Labour leaving UK vulnerable at time of war. So this is the Express with critics of the government's defence investment plan, citing Liberal Democrat MP Mike Martin, who sits on the Defence Select Committee, who says that plans could herald the end of Royal Navy as we know it. He warns that the transition from warships to autonomous vessels leaves the UK vulnerable. That's according to the paper. The Observer, the case against Asma al-Assad. So the former First Lady of Syria is a British citizen. She grew up in West London. She was known as Emma at school. She worked in the city. Then, with her husband, Bashir al-Assad, she led a regime that murdered, tortured, and disappeared more than 500,000 of her people. The British government has so far done nothing to bring her to justice. So this is the Observer's main feature, their main Sunday feature, writing that she is a former First Lady, because, of course, the Assad regime has fallen, as it were, and is a British citizen. Where are they based currently? I feel like they're sheltering in an embassy somewhere. Anyway, that's basically their headline, and they lament the British government, who's so far done nothing to bring her to justice. There it is. Those are your papers right here on your Sunday morning. I do hope you're okay. You're listening to TT Radio. It's Finn with The Breakfast Show. We're talking de-stressing, tackling tasks, and everything in between. Let's hear from our sponsors, and when we come back, we will talk more right here on TT Radio.
In education, we all want recruitment to be fair and inclusive because the gender pay gap won't disappear without clear, practical steps in how we hire. Recent national research shows schools are already taking meaningful action. 40% of leaders now include pay or progression details in adverts. 35% highlight well-being support. And around 1 in 5 are using anonymised shortlisting to reduce bias. Teaching Vacancies, the Department for Education's free official job listing service, makes these steps easier with clear salary fields, flexible working filters, and an application format that supports blind recruitment. It also removes previous salary questions so candidates are assessed on their skills and experience rather than their past pay. For your next hire or your next role, go online and search Teaching Vacancies Gov UK.
This show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit hashitlearning.com to explore the full range of titles.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Just gone 9:40 on a Sunday morning. I do hope you're okay. We're talking stress. We're talking how to de-stress, tackling the worst stresses first. That's what we're going to be focused on for the next little bit. If you do want to get in touch, all you got to do is send a comment in the comments box. I'll pick it up. I'll read it out. It's that simple. Stay with me.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
And talking about we will be doing, it's the Sunday breakfast with Finn, and we're talking about stress, how to manage it. The final few days of term for most of us, that's if you teach in a state school in Britain, or actually most schools, yes, it is this week, isn't it? Most schools are breaking. Of course, if it's an independent school, I know a teacher, in fact, who teaches at a private school, and actually teaches a former British number one's tennis player's son. There, you do the maths. Not Tim Henman, but the other one. He was a big. Anyway, teaches him and also teaches a Windsor. Let's not go further, though, and identify the school or the person teaching, because that wouldn't be fair. But they finished in June. They finished at the end of June. Could you believe it? Most schools finishing in July, of course, and my school, no exception, finishing on Wednesday. So, the acronym that you may have heard before, SMART, was pioneered by the American consultant Peter Drucker during the 1980s, and it's still recommended by psychologists today. And I thought, do you know what? That's probably helpful to talk about it now. How you manage your stress. SMART. SMART targets: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. I think those acronyms do vary slightly, because when I learned it, it was specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. So specific, you choose the goals that can be clearly articulated, right? So that's what the S stands for. Sometimes I think it can also stand for simple or sensible. You can sort of play around with it, actually. Just like the acronym BREATHE, you can play around with it. Or SPICES, that's another acronym for getting all the different things in your life: spiritual, physical, intellectual, cultural, emotional, and social needs. Same thing with SMART targets. It's, you can vary the acronym. Getting a bit obsessed now. SMART, so that's specific. Measurable, have a way of tackling your progress. So sometimes it's actually identified as meaningful or motivating. So that's measurable. Achievable, aim for realistic targets. So it's got to be attainable. Relevant, sometimes referred to, as I said, realistic. The outcome must be useful, I guess. And time-bound. Set a date which you intend to have the task completed. SMART targets, that can help, because as I was talking about before the news, David Burns, the American psychiatrist and CBT expert, talks about action coming first and the motivation comes later. So tackling the worst stresses first, there's such a thing as eating the frog. You come across that phrase. One of my last assistant head teachers for teaching and learning at my last school actually would have this on her door, because she would have to go through a series of really difficult conversations with people. And she talked about eating the frog. You tackle the worst stressor first. And that is an old proverb. If you begin your day by eating a live frog, you can enjoy the comfort of knowing that nothing else that happens to you today will be that bad. Isn't that interesting? Eating a live frog, goodness me. So if you have a frog to cope with, it's going to stress you out knowing that it will be dealt with at some point. So if your schedule allows for it, do the thing you're most dreading first and get it out of the way. After that, your other stressors will feel much less daunting. Isn't that interesting? Could do that. Rewarding yourself. So American psychologist Robert Eisenberger proposes a theory he calls learned industriousness. So put simply, if we come to associate working hard with being rewarded, hard work in and of itself begins to feel much more rewarding and less stressful. That's the classical conditioning approach. You essentially condition the stress with the reward, and thereby you end up wanting to do it. Almost, it establishes your motivation. And of course, if you're lucky enough to be in a school who do praise your efforts, because schools aren't that good, are they, at praising teachers? They're not. Come on. Yes, there are going to be some pockets of some schools that do it well, but often, let's just face the facts that teaching can be an underappreciated profession. But if you're lucky enough to have a school that does, you may already be experiencing this benefit. Studies confirm that praise is a sufficient reward, even if you have to reward yourself in small ways. So a 2007 American study found that the most important elements of reward are that it should be quick and reliable. So if you decided to reward yourself for a job well done, keep that promise to yourself. What are your thoughts on that? I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let's hear from our sponsors right here on TT Radio. And when we come back in the final bit of today's show, we're going to be talking about striking a healthy balance, making room for improvement, and creating mastery experiences. Stay with me.
In education, we all want recruitment to be fair and inclusive because the gender pay gap won't disappear without clear, practical steps in how we hire. Recent national research shows schools are already taking meaningful action. 40% of leaders now include pay or progression details in adverts. 35% highlight well-being support, and around 1 in 5 are using anonymised shortlisting to reduce bias. Teaching vacancies, the Department for Education's free official job listing service, makes these steps easier with clear salary fields, flexible working filters, and an application format that supports blind recruitment. It also removes previous salary questions so candidates are assessed on their skills and experience rather than their past pay. For your next hire or your next role, go online and search Teaching Vacancies Gov UK.
This show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit hachetlearning.com to explore the full range of titles.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good morning. It's the Sunday Breakfast with Finn. It's coming up to 10 to 10. And in the final bit of today's show, we're talking about creating mastery experiences, striking a healthy balance, and making room for improvement. I've got some stats for you. Stats on a Sunday. Here we go. Let's do this.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
And talk it out we will be doing. According to a 2004 study by a Canadian psychologist, people are actually more prone to procrastinate if they have a low opinion of their own efficacy. So in other words, they don't trust their own competence. So let's talk about creating some mastery, because one of the best ways to improve your confidence as a teacher is to consider your life outside work and build up the memory bank of accomplishments, great or small, and then think, well, actually, work is one thing, and you can bring in a whole host of holistic things from outside into the classroom. And it allows you to look back and recall times when you proved to yourself that you are, in fact, able to get things done when you set your mind to it, not just in the classroom. So with that knowledge, tackling work projects may actually feel less intimidating. That's easy for you to say. A 2013 study, actually, by the American Psychological Association, so the APA this is, found that only 36% of employees felt they were given enough resources to help manage workplace stress. But with good coping tactics, what we talked about the whole hour today, there's going to be ways forward. There's going to be ways that you can address that, right? So here's some stats for you. Workplace stress, we're saying, is the norm in teaching. But if you find yourself under pressure, you can actually limit the impact by managing the aspects you can control. Go with what you can control, not with what you cannot control. So take a look at your own work habits and work on your coping strategies. 54% is the stat I wanted to give you. So this is a statistic from a 2016 American survey found that 54% of professionals across teaching and a whole host of other professions said that increased their commitment to a better work-life balance in the previous year. There it is, just focusing on what you can control. 58%, that's the other stat I wanted to give you. This was in 2017. The American Psychological Association again. This was their annual stress report. They found that 58% of the people surveyed described work as a very or somewhat significant source of stress in their life. But we can do something about it as teachers. And that's the final bit of the show that I wanted to mention about striking a healthy balance. Because workplace experts have actually recommended 4 major pillars for a healthy balance between personal and professional commitments. So this can be applied to teaching, but to humans almost universally. So they are: set aside, look into, plan your time, and limit. Let's talk about those. Set aside. So you set aside distraction-free time to focus on what really matters. There's a really useful, I follow a Buddhist life coach just on some of the social media, and she suggests just breathe. Now, that sounds quite cliche just to say just breathe, but breathe in. When you breathe in, you say the word just. And when you breathe out, you say the word breathe. And it does something. It allows you essentially to set aside a distraction-free moment, a brain break, if you will. Try it this week. It's not a gimmick. Well, it may be a gimmick for some, but it works for me and obviously works for her. This is an interesting one. So the look into is actually look into reducing your commute. Telecommuting or flexible time that lets you skip the rush hour can reduce stress considerably. A long commute. Those of you that follow me on social media know that I'm trying to get around the world. Phileas Fogg did it in 80 days. I'm trying to do it in a lot longer than that. But every country in the world, I'm on 88 at the moment, 88 countries. Hopefully going to a whole host of countries this year. But where am I going with that? Yes, there's a lot of travel in that. And travel in and of itself can be draining, can't it? It's that airport, just even the taxi to the airport, it can just be really miserable. So look at reducing your commute. Limit communications technology. So if it's outside working hours and you don't absolutely have to send that email, then wait and plan your time off. Do it well in advance. Well, as teachers, we don't really get to plan our time off other than know when our holidays are. But we know that a holiday's on the way. That's why, hopefully, we're in good spirits. Hopefully. One would hope, right? There it is. So, hopefully all of that works. The final show of this run of shows will be next week, and we'll be talking next week about burnout. Taking steps before September, before it's too late. Sounds ominous, doesn't it? I need to calm down. But if you don't like this show, let me know, of course. Don't let the CEO know, but let me know. I can deal with it by blocking you. No, I'd love to hear your comments, whatever they are. Good feedback, bad feedback, and everything in between. But if you're not satisfied with this show, there's loads of other shows you can look at. Just go to TT Radio. I say look because some are visual as well as audio. The Late Show with Konstantinos Papas, Belonging in Higher Education, Creating Inclusive Learning for Diverse Students. So that's Sunday, 8 p.m. Thursday, 6 p.m., The Twilight Show with Tony and Yannick. Summer Lovin'. Let's share some positive, funny, and uplifting educational stories. Lots of really interesting shows. A curriculum for the future. Monday, 6 p.m. with Paula, rethinking opportunity, technical education, and success. And finally, Carl Smith, Friday, 11 a.m., The Morning Break. Left Behind in Plain Sight. Why white working class pupils are falling behind. Differentiation may be dead, but adaptive teaching is alive in a lot of classrooms. And I'm sure there is a whole host of shows around the pedagogy of that. I tend to focus just on the mental health side of things because I'm a psychology teacher by trade, trained to teach mindfulness. I know a thing or two about mental health. Yeah, I'm not an expert, and certainly it's not therapy, but hopefully you get something out of this show. Next week, as I say, the final week of our run of shows. And then from September, the time of the show will probably move. We'll probably have traditional brunch on a Saturday rather than a Sunday. So do adjust your timings if you love this show. But next week, I'll talk about burnout and stepping in before September, because at a certain point, work strain passes the point of ordinary stress and becomes outright toxic. That can happen. So you just have to try and spot the dangers. Because I think I was very close to the limit this year, actually. I'm going to own that, and I'll talk more about that next week on next week's show. That's the plan anyway. You can listen again on Podbean, and as I say, check out the full host of shows on ttradio.org. It's been an absolute pleasure keeping you company this Sunday. I'll see you next Sunday at 9. Have a good one.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.
Take standard for world-class vision, world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.